the position itself, not being a municipal employee. But I think Lauren may have, he may have an argument, or there may be an argument also that we'd be removing a benefit that he's receiving. The other thing to think about too would be that other municipal employees wouldn't necessarily be able to apply for the job and laterally move into it. So we might be losing a base of skills. For instance, when Lauren was to leave, and he'll leave eventually, there might be another municipal employee that could use that job. And if the funding is pretty much neutral, I'm not so sure what the benefit would be to remove him or remove that position from municipal employee, because there's some really good benefits to being a municipal employee, even though PERS 4 is not as good as PERS 1, 2, 3. Lauren, are you in PERS 1, 2, or 3?
3.
3.
Just as a comment on that, you would be a private employer. I mean, it would be the position would be eliminated from municipal employment. That position would go away. You would hire up as a private employer, and to the extent that you want to provide benefits to that employee, I mean, we'll provide, I mean, I think that the funding implies both wages and benefits. That would assume that, but you would have to make a determination what those benefits are, just like a private employer would be. You know, and I know that you know this better than I, but the legacy associated with this is that originally the trust was staffed by a part-time person in employee relations. And then it sort of evolved from being a temporary, we're going to do this transition, and then it became a full-time position. It was still in employee relations, and then as it has evolved over time and various opinions have come in terms of the accountability factor, we are where we are today, which in my mind is why we're having this discussion, because it's evolved into something that was really never anticipated in the original ordinance. It was anticipated that this would be a separate entity. You know, we've talked around all kinds of different scenarios. I mean, if the trust wanted to contract with the municipality to provide these services, that's another option to be able to do that. But right now we have this one foot in each camp. So just to circle back on the benefits thing, it'd be up to you to decide what benefits you want. I mean, this isn't about, with all due respect, and I always feel compelled to apologize to Lauren because it's not about Lauren at all. This isn't about the person, it's about the function. You know, what are the functions that need to be provided? And clearly the trust would benefit from his experience and his expertise that comes, but what your relationship is with your employee is up to you. So yes, municipal benefits would be forfeited.
Nancy, I don't have the benefit of the history, so do you know what warranted the position to go from like a part-time position to a full-time position? Did the duties increase?
I think that over time it was one of those things where, you know, the job expands to the funds available and the position available, and the needs of the board expanded. I mean, a lot of it went from, we'll staff this function on a temporary basis until we figure out how to get it done, to this is the way we've always done it.
Which happens all too often. I remember all the history, but
Yeah, I can offer something on it. I was on the original negotiating committee to create the trust, and I was on the trust when it first got started for the first 7 years, I believe, 5 to 7 years. It was always anticipated that this was going to be a full-time position. In fact, it was anticipated it would be more than a full-time position. We would need other employees to work the trust. And in fact, where we're at today is a full-time position and a part-time position that the trust pays for, does not get paid through the municipality. So it was always anticipated that way. Day one of the trust, there were no participants. There wasn't a push to have a lot of people working on the trust because there wasn't a lot of work to do. But as people started retiring into the trust, we started building up the health reimbursement account. It required more and more time and employee power, and that's why the trust about 4 years ago or so ended up hiring a part-time employee to help out with the overflow, and that is growing as well.
The original seed money, the $2 million for seed money was for the operation of the trust. And that was, just as Everett said, that was an anticipation of us eventually moving to a full-time employee and then maybe even having one or two more. We weren't sure what the load was going to be. And at the time, an HRA was new to the entire country. I mean, we were one of the first ones in the country to set up a program like this. And it was very progressive, but this, I disagree with your synopsis of what had occurred over time period. It was anticipated. It was supposed to go this way. And if anything, we've worked with every single administration that we've had since inception of this and worked with them closely. And we've had these discussions with each new administration as to how to operate the trust. And once again, we want to always reevaluate and work effectively. But it was anticipated, and I go back to my original argument. When Warren was hired, he was told he was going to be a municipal employee, and that was a decision that we made with the administration at the time, and and that's the way it is now. Now, if we move to a part-time employee or something like that, but because we can, then I would agree that the position might be reduced, or if we hired another person, we might have to go outside. But I still think that original argument is a basis. If we change his employment status, I think we could say that in the future we could change easily, but for Lauren himself, I'm how many years on?
This isn't about Lauren.
Yeah, no, but I mean
It's about the position.
the argument I'm making here is about Lauren, though, is in that we would be diminishing his benefit because we're going to cut off a retirement program. And so I just think that's something that should be taken into consideration and make sure that we're not diminishing the benefit that.
Okay, well, I have just two comments. I have to agree, overall, it isn't about Lauren, okay? But today, Lauren has the position, so Lauren's involved, so indirectly, it affects Lauren, so I understand both sides,
Sure.
okay? Does anybody else, Dennis?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see the documents that you guys have that support your contention that this was always intended to be a full-time position, because the AM in 94 that sets this thing up talks about how at the outset it would be a municipal employee, but it also goes on with the financing plan to say that this is a salary and benefits of one technical level position, part-time at range 14, step A. The part-time position is reflected at 20% full-time in 95, 96, and 30% in 97. The funding is $14,000 in 95, $9,000 in 96. And it says at the outset, although it would be a municipal employee, the trust could in the future decide this arrangement does not suit their needs. They can independently engage the services of an employee or contractor, and the municipality will pay annually an amount equivalent solely to the salary and benefits of up to one equivalent municipal level employee. So while the municipality agreed to provide an employee at the beginning, it was never contemplated that that would be a permanent arrangement, and nor was it ever intended to be a full-time arrangement. And as Nancy did indicate, it's morphed, obviously, but I have trouble with the assumption that that's the way it has to be, because it's certainly not the way it was contemplated when it was set up.
And I would just like to add, that was 1994. Since 1994, technology has significantly improved. Business processes are much more streamlined. The tools we have in our box to perform our job are a lot more advanced. So just because it took one back many, many years ago, it seems like the objective today is to figure out what is the most efficient way to do this today, not based on what we did in 1994. And I would hope that that would be our objective.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah,
That's
so
quite a
let's
few years ago.
think about the future and move on. Just a suggestion.
Okay, talking about moving on, any other comments on number A? Okay, let's go to B, combining functions with P&F retirement system. Who wants to start?
I'd just like to say that maybe we're a little premature in, maybe we can postpone this one because the trust is going to be meeting with Chuck Laird next week, and we'll have a better idea of where the board wants to go with this particular question here. I guess we could still discuss it at this level here, but it's not sounding like it's going to be a promising solution right now.
Okay, so fair enough. we'll go on to number, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I do have a comment about that, because I really embrace the concept where if there's a will, there's a way. I mean, if we really want to make this happen in terms of combining this board with the Police and Fire Retirement Board, I think as an organization, we could collaboratively work together and make that happen. My perception is that on the Police and Fire Retirement System, which I am a board member of, there may not be the will to make this happen. And I think that we need to look at it from, you know, a much larger perspective in terms of just stepping back with a clean slate and saying, is this really the most efficient way to go? And to have the Police and Fire Retirement System just unilaterally say, no, we don't want to do this, I think is inappropriate.
Okay, and thank you, Lucinda, but I don't think that's what I heard
That's what I heard.
today.
No, but
Yeah,
what,
that's not what I
remember,
heard.
she's talking about the board that she's on.
Right.
That's the receiving
Thank you,
end.
Julia, and I understand that, but let's talk about this, you know, the Municipal Audit Committee meeting right now, okay? Because that's what, I mean, we're the entity addressing these issues.
Okay. Did you say the medical board, or did you say the retirement system board?
Chuck, we said Chuck Net.
Yeah, that's the
Who's he
retirement
with?
system
But
board.
I'm on both boards. I'm on the medical trust and I'm on the retirement.
And Lucinda's on,
And I'm on the retirement. board.
right, right,
I'm
Right.
also on both boards.
Right.
right.
But it's my perception that there is not a supportive attitude on the retirement board to consolidating these organizations. And if you approach the problem in a negative perception, it won't happen. But if you approach it with a very open, let's really work collaboratively to see how it could work, you get a different result. And I'm not convinced at this point that it's being managed very openly.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, my response would be, being on both boards, we've obviously talked about it. We talked about it on the retirement board. And what we're having problems with is who's going to pay for the funding to explore these ideas. The legal aspect, whether or not, you know, we can actually combine it, do an analysis on the retirement board, who's going to pay for that? And at this point, is the audit committee going to put the money up to pay for it? Because I don't know if the trust is right now, because we haven't actually met. So I don't know what our position is going to be until next week. But after we meet with Chuck Laird and get some questions and answers done, the board will meet separately and figure out which direction we want to go, whether we want to continue to pursue it. So again, my question gets back, does the audit committee want to pursue it further and put the money up to explore some of the legal aspects of it? Because that's where it's going to come down to, is the legal
Well,
aspects.
first off, the audit committee doesn't even have any staff, never mind funding the study. So
So
that's on the table.
that's why I throw that out there. I don't know.
Lucinda?
I think that there are ways that we could combine them. And I think that there are some incentives that we could present to the executive director of the Police and Fire Retirement System that would enable a combination of certain functions. I recognize that they are two separate, you know, trusts and they have separate requirements. But I'm optimistic in that we could create a more efficient organization with sharing some of the duties associated with managing the two trusts.
One of the things just that I notice on the employee relations side is that we do receive payments for medical insurance, and we actually receive little pieces from each groups. So there is clearly a relationship there because members are participating a little bit from this trust and contributing a little bit from this trust. So it's often, you know, from our eyes, a little bit confusing because really it's the same employee. Why aren't we seeing things more consolidated or together? So it's just something that we see on the administration or the end side, that the members are actually sending in dollars from both trusts.
Okay, Greg, do you have a comment?
Well, my comment, and I'm sorry, I don't really know your name.
Lucinda.
Lucinda.
Kristen?
Lucinda.
Lucinda, oh, okay. And that is that since I came on the board, the packet I received from when it was created was there was some legal reason why the trust, the medical trust, could not be part of the police and fire retirement system at the beginning, which is why the medical trust was created in the first place. It was not incorporated into the retirement system. And so for me, that is a significant legal issue about whether it can actually be accomplished or not. And from what I understand, these strategic plan meetings that we're having, we're trying to address that and several other issues and how they affect the members. Because the last thing the trust needs is to be involved with a big lawsuit or a negative IRS ruling pulling our tax-free exemption that would create even more significant problems. And so these things are not necessarily whether they're positive or negative on their feelings, it's whether or not you can legally do this. And we have an attorney, Dennis Wheeler obviously is attorney for the city, but why was this trust created as opposed to just having it incorporated with the police and fire retirement system in the beginning should be a major hurdle that it's looked at and examined before we even go and start pointing fingers and saying that people aren't, you know, they don't just want to do it. I think there's some serious consequences either way you go, and I think that they all need to be looked at in a professional manner with the people that have the knowledge and expertise to provide that information before decisions are made.
Just one comment. Thank you for your comment. And, you know, what I was going to basically say is, again, this is the Municipal Audit Committee to talk about this issue. And, you know, besides the fact that there are some members of this committee that are on the Police and Fire Retirement Board, this committee does not have the expertise, nor is it our role at this point to make a recommendation whether or not the two should be combined. With that said, Andrew.
Let me go back to Everett's point. One of the big issues that the retirement board is having is that they can't spend any direct time of their employees because that's, in a sense, is commingling their funds to explore this avenue. So in order to get the retirement board to explore that avenue, someone has to fund it for them because they can't spend retirement board funds to do that. And I want to point out to Lucinda that I am not put off by this proposal at all. In fact, I would say that I personally am in agreement with exactly what you said. If there was a will, there is a way to do this. However, that being said, there are 9 people on that board that would have to approve it, and there are 6 people on this board that would have to approve it. And the retirement board itself can't expend any of their funds. There's a big commingling issue about
Exclusive benefit rule.
Yeah, and it's so any work done by a retirement board employee has to be done only for the benefit of those retirement board members. And everybody that's in this plan is a member of the retirement board, but everybody in the retirement board is not a member of this plan, the retirement system. And so that's where you end up taking away from other members by spending money on that. So there does have to be a funding mechanism in order to get this done, or in order to explore this. I wouldn't even say to get it done. In order to explore it, there has to be a funding mechanism, and that's one of the biggest arguments or debates that I've heard from Chuck Laird. That being said, I don't feel, Lucinda, like there's an adverse thought to this, and in fact, I think it could be very efficient. And I picture a separate employee or a portion of, I mean, if it was, then I would picture something along the lines of another employee in a retirement board office, or maybe the medical trust paying for a portion of each one of their salaries for the time that they would spend on it. And then you have 3 or 4 people trained in the administration of it with a third-party administrator. In my mind, I can conceptually see this as being very efficient and very easy, but as you said, with technology, I can see where that could happen. But it isn't anything that could, I mean, we could put this in front of the Assembly and do it, and there would be lawsuits flying everywhere because of the commingling issue right now, because we would be requiring the retirement board to fund something that they legally, in my understanding, can't fund, and it would be overriding 2 boards that are set up. So,
But don't worry, it ain't gonna happen. Yes, do you have some comments?
Well, I think Dennis and Julia had their hands up before I did.
Well, I thought you did. I'm taking notes, but if you want to,
No, I
Julia was
just
next.
to echo, I think, what I was going to comment, having some background in interest management, is I don't think we're talking about commingling the trusts at all. I think that the concept here, and it's in the
Exactly.
ordinance, the ordinance anticipates a common management structure. And obviously, there would have to be, I mean, the fundamental management responsibilities are the same. You know, it's investment, fiduciary investment management, and paying claims. And I think that the financial structure associated with how you would provide that common management is something that could be negotiated in a service agreement that's by mutual agreement by the trust. But each trust is a separate entity. So I don't think that there's any, at least certainly from not my any even expectation there would be a commingling or a merging of the trusts, but rather that there would be a common management of the trust functions. So the administrative support management functions.
I guess my comment was directed much along the same lines as Nancy's, but I'd like to go ahead and restate it because I'm coming into it new. I think that this discussion is really, really good for somebody like me who's having to catch up. And I forget your name, sir.
I'm Greg.
Greg.
Stewart.
I think that what Greg was talking about is answered by Nancy. And Greg, what I heard you say was that there was a reason why they created separate trusts in the first place. So why are we talking about combining them? Because there could be a legal problem. And you're right that there could be a legal problem if the actual trusts were being combined. But what I hear Nancy talking about is when there's this trust being administered over here, the administration of the trust, and this trust being administered over here, there may be some common efficiency for both to combine the administration of those two trusts without combining the trusts. In the same way that ODS does medical insurance for the city, and they do it for, Portland, and they do it, all over the place. They don't combine our medical plans together, but they are experts at doing that. And if we had the same one, we might save money. And so that's kind of that part. Then what I hear Andy saying is that one of the obstacles that Lucinda may be seeing as she sits on these is based in a concern that to even explore the co-administration of these things up here, they're running against something that I'm not really familiar enough with to comment on in its detail, but it's called the co-mingling of funds rule or something like that. And it means that to expend the money to get to here is an obstacle. And that takes me back to what Lucinda was saying, which is, well, we don't want the monetary obstacles yet to get in the way. And so that we should keep that open. So when Andy hears from, or somebody else hears from Chuck, we can't go any farther because we don't have a way to explore it, then we need to not think of that as an absolute no. We need to find the way to explore it, and it may not be through audit committee funds, because as Elvie has explained, we don't have special funding for the audit committee, but there may be ways to figure out how to explore funding.
I agree with you, Julia. Thank you very much. Dennis, you are next in line.
I agreeing with you and Julia and Nancy.
I like
it when that works out.
We gotta tie the loose ends.
But, I think the concern on the last part about the expense of exploring the idea, it seems to me that if a board, like the retirement system board or the trust board, couldn't look at this because of that rule, it would beg the question whether they could ever look at anything to improve the efficiency.
Well, this board can't.
If I might finish.
Yeah.
So the idea, this isn't about the retirement board exploring what's best for the medical trust. It's really about exploring what's best for the both of them and these shared efficiencies. It's hard for me to imagine a scenario where there would be a legal hurdle to either of them exploring the concept of shared efficiencies that benefit all the members of both systems. But I'll look at it because I'm curious to see that answer, because I would hate to see that be a roadblock. It doesn't make to me logical sense to stop the exploration on that point.
Thank you, Dennis. You're next, Everett.
I don't disagree with what Dennis just said as far as, to explore it. I don't think there's a problem at all to do that legally. But to go back to what Nancy said earlier, I just want to clarify, it was not the intent to merge the two boards initially. It was an option. And the option was, when we were in negotiations, is the retirement board has this financial setup. We have investment advisors, we have people that are investor money and all that. And the idea was, can the medical trust merge that with the retirement board? And so we wrote the option into the ordinance to explore that, and we did explore it 16 years ago. And as it turned out, it wasn't feasible to do. I'm not saying it's not feasible now, but at the time, with the information we had, it just wasn't feasible.
Just
Are you
to
finished?
clarify.
Are you finished?
I could be
Okay.
Just to ask you a question, on what you've said so far, what you're saying that when they explored that, what was being explored was whether they could actually merge two wards?
No.
Okay, what was
No,
explored?
what we talked about in negotiations and what we put in the ordinance was actually, we didn't have any vehicles set up initially for the $2 million as far as a bank or investment advisors or people to invest the money with. The retirement board had all that in place. We were going to try to piggyback on that, and it turned out we couldn't do it because we couldn't mix the money together. And because of that, so we couldn't commingle medical trust money, basically health and welfare money, with the retirement money. There's an IRS rule that says you can't mix those two together. We weren't able to go down that route. So the medical trust had to hire an investment advisor. We had to hire people to invest our money and do it separately. But it was written in code so we could explore that to see if it was possible. As it turned out 16 years ago, 17, it wasn't possible. I'm not saying it's not possible now, I don't know. We could look at it, but it wasn't possible then. At least that's what we revised.
Okay, thank you, Andy, you were next.
The final, just, the retirement board itself has 3 different plans, and they're co-administrative, and the money's not commingled, but it's invested the same, and then the administrative track it separately. And the idea is to, if these boards were to merge, that we would run along that same path or a similar path. The money's going to be invested separately. It's not going to be commingled. The administrative functions would be shared. In a sense, it would be like, to start, you could even say, well, we'll buy a copy machine together, we'll pay for it pro rata. That's the kind of things that we're talking about, being more efficient. And I can just tell you that this board wants to look at that, and we're open to it. So let me.
Great, thank you. And Greg, you were next?
That's okay.
Okay, so.
Topic's been covered now.
All right, thanks. I just have one comment. So what we're looking at right now is not combining the two trusts, but combining the administration of the two trusts, correct?
It would be like a shared service organization for administration of 2 trusts.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, yes, okay. And then secondly is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing that we may at some point need to find some funding to explore this. Am I correct?
I believe the argument that we're hearing from administrator of the retirement board is that he can't have his employees spend any time looking into the potential of doing this without being reimbursed.
Okay, so it looks like everybody at this level, at this ad hoc municipal audit committee agrees that we should look into it, and I do, absolutely, But I need to have Everett come back to this committee after you meet with the board to find out exactly what the next step would be in order to do that legally. And I'm happy to hear from our attorneys, but that's the next step in terms of combining the administration of the 2 funds. And so just so everybody's clear, okay?
Okay.
All right, any other comments before we move on? Okay, then the next, we only have 10 minutes left, but the next item is the administration to contract services to the trust. Who wants to begin? Dennis?
I'm not sure where the idea came from, but I can't think of off the top of my head, maybe you did. But I can't think of a reason we couldn't do this from the municipal side. I mean, obviously we contract out all sorts of professional services, so why we couldn't do it here, similar to what we do with ODS or your investment teams that you have that manage your portfolios. So I can't think of a legal problem off the top of my head.
Nancy?
Yeah, I think I opened this can of worms. Clearly, if we took the direction that the trust was going to have its own employees and was going to manage its own functions, they could contract with a third-party administrator to have the services provided. What we looked at was we were spending money on an in-house employee, on a municipal employee, to provide claims payments and administration similar to those services that are provided by ODS and other third-party administrators. So when we were looking at budget scenarios, we went and said, what if we were to contract out the claims administration portion, since our obligation was to provide general administrative services. So that's where this came from, that if it were the municipality's preference, what we would say is let's achieve the financial efficiencies and benefit of having a third party do this, and we went out and priced it, and it was very reasonable. HRA administration is a relatively common third party function these days. So that was kind of where this thing started. I continue to believe that there are all kinds of financial savings and efficiencies to be made through the claims administration process with a third party as opposed to doing it in-house. Having said that, it's clearly up to the board. If we take this direction that they're going to figure it out themselves, then they can or they can't, depending on what they want to do. If it remained a municipality function, I clearly think that would be a strong recommendation that we would make.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to make a comment, Lisa?
No, I
Okay.
think that they said it, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, then, next in line is Andy.
The board is currently, has created a subcommittee, and that subcommittee has a ODS coming to make us a presentation next week. We've also been in contact with a few other people that have either declined or claim they're going to make us some additional bids, per se, for those services, and we're strongly in agreement that that's a fiduciary responsibility to look into this, and we're currently in that process.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Nancy.
I just wanted to say that, that there could be an opportunity here to piggyback on the municipality's contract. So, I can see that somebody coming in and saying, for a client this small, just the trust, you may not get the efficiencies
And that is
associated
ODS.
with it. So,
Right.
we would be happy to work with you.
That is ODS.
Great, thank
Right.
you. Nancy, Everett?
And just to follow up, it may be a moot point, talking about this, because in the next couple of months, we may resolve it already if we
Right.
decide to go down this route.
Right. And this is just an agenda. But with that said, I'm going to postpone number D until our next meeting, because I want to give Everett now an opportunity under other to talk about what he began to talk about at the beginning of our meeting. So you have the floor, Everett.
Well, just to follow up what I started is, the medical trust is exploring a lot of different ideas. Many of the same ideas that are on the agenda here today for the audit ad hoc committee. We truly believe that we should be looking at efficiencies on our trust. We've been around for over 16 years now. I think we've been fairly efficient, but what happened is technology has gotten to the point where we aren't as well adapted to take advantage of some of those technologies as we should be. If we do end up contracting out a third-party administrator, then we may not have to upgrade our technologies. If we decide not to contract out our third-party administration, we may have to upgrade some things. Lauren has brought a lot of things to our attention, new computers, new software, and different things like that we may end up having to implement, but we won't know until we take the first step and figure out whether or not we want to do the third-party administration and contract out that portion. The other thing that we don't know is how much of the how much efficiencies will that generate for our trust? As far as Lauren's time, our part-time employees' time, I think we pretty much know that the part-time employee would go away if we ended up contracting this out, but we don't know how much impact it's going to have on, Lauren's position and what he does. But I do think that the medical trust is making these endeavors to implement some efficiencies, but I'm just trying to let everyone know these things take time. I mean, we only meet once a month, so it's not like we're dealing with this every single day. And unfortunately, things kind of move slow when you're only meeting once a month. But we are meeting and we are pushing forward with this. And like Andy says, we even are breaking it down to subcommittees, so we can kind of push things along a little bit quicker. So, hopefully next week we'll have a little more information to report back.
Right, and just one comment, I'm certainly not, and I don't think anybody else is trying to push things along really quickly, because things take time, like you just said. It's not a miracle here about to happen. It's, taking time and being reasonable. And so with that said, when is your next board meeting?
We have a Tuesday board meeting with Chuck Laird after hours.
Okay.
He's going to meet with us, I believe, at 5, and then we have a board meeting Thursday.
Okay, so here's my recommendation. If anybody doesn't agree, just let me know. But my recommendation is that, since your board is meeting and discussing a lot of the things that we're discussing, I would like to wait until this committee gets together again. Your board has some recommendations, and that can be the main item on our next meeting agenda, and then we can take it from there. Does that work for everybody? Works? Okay. So with that said, I don't want to sit here right now and try and determine when the next ad hoc committee meeting is going to be. So why don't you get in touch with me, Everett, and let me know when your board has done its job, if you will. And then I'll schedule another ad hoc audit committee meeting, and maybe for an hour and a half, so we can not have 27 meetings before we make some decisions.
Okay.
Just some information for you and your board. We are hopefully moving to a new ERP system that is a state-of-the-art, fabulous system, and it may be that there is functionality for trust management and administration in that system that you may want to explore, that we could potentially negotiate a really great price. But, that would be, you would have to really define business requirements, da-da-da-da-da. But just keep that open as an option.
ERP program, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
What is ERP?
Enterprise resource plan.
Yeah, it's a new computer system. It has a very robust employee relations module.
That's the place to go.
Okay, any other comments before we adjourn?
It's like the new, it's the 20th.
Well, thank you everyone for being here this morning. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everybody.